Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Drive Pink Dialogue. It is a Thursday evening. It is a lovely Thursday evening. It's episode number 176. I'm your host, Scotty. I'm here with my co-host, Saur. Today, I think it's going to be a very interesting episode where we talk about player development. I think we have some hypotheses on what we think might have happened, but we're going to go through some of the numbers and figure this all out together. But before all of that, Saur, my friend, my co-host, how are you feeling on this lovely Thursday evening?
This time last year, Inter Miami had already won the Supporters' Shield. We were going into the last day of the season, hoping that Inter Miami breaks the points record, right? And we were more than hopeful. We knew that was going to happen. Right now, it doesn't even feel like the season started. It genuinely feels like we have so much more to play for, at least so much more to prove this season. I'm feeling fine today. It's been a long week, and there's nothing better to get my mind off things than to talk about Inter Miami with you. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. I know it's going to be an interesting one, a polarizing one, but dare I say an important one.
Important might be the biggest one for this conversation because I think the topic we're going to discuss is really important. And whether our conclusions that it's not in a good spot or it is in a good spot, whatever the case is, player development is consistently and constantly important. And so if you want to be good at it, you have to be focused on it 365 days a year. It's not the type of thing where you can be lax about it without everything slowly, but then potentially for a long time falling apart. So if it goes bad, you want to fix it quickly, and you want to, while it's good, consistently be on top of it so that it stays good. Let's start with this. Last week, the 22 under 22 for the MLS was released. It was, and for those that don't know, 22 under 22 is an awards list that the MLS media does every year to rank the best 22 players under 22 years old. Last year, Inter Miami was the theme of that list. Diego Gomez won the award, came in first place. Redondo was number 5. Benjamin Kramaski was number 6. Toto Aviles, number 12. David Ruiz was number 21. Inter Miami had 5 players on that list, which was clearly the most last season and probably one of the highest ever in the MLS. Fast forward to 2025, and Inter Miami only has 1 player on that list. It's Noah Allen at number 12. And we talked about Noah winning and getting on this list over the course of the last week and a half. But it is certainly less. And it is certainly, I think, noticeable that Inter Miami doesn't have the number of really young and impactful players that maybe we would have thought they should have based on what was coming back this season. Again, Kramaski was eligible to have been on this list again. He would not have made it even if he still was with Inter Miami. Toto Aviles, obviously a guy that's eligible for this list, didn't make it. David Ruiz, same thing. So for the Herons, something it feels like has gone wrong.
And there's 2 aspects to this. But first of all, a damning indictment to where we are as a club this season. I myself am not surprised that Inter Miami doesn't have more than 1 player on this list. I don't know about you, but it's understandable why the list is the way it is. And as I mentioned, the 2 aspects are, one, that players that we had last season who still might be eligible for this season have not made the list for one reason or another. And Inter Miami doesn't have any new youth players who we could actually consider eventually being a part of this. For instance, Santi Morales, right? So it's not just the fact that we don't have our old players who we would have preferred to actually be on the upward trajectory this season, contribute even more than they did last season, but also we don't have any new players coming in from the youth system who we can now look to and say, these are the future of Inter Miami.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly right. Your point about us not being surprised is accurate. Inter Miami doesn't have any snubs. I will just mention for clarity a couple players that we consider as young players, Yannick Bright, Ian Frey, Talasco Segovia, are not eligible for this list. They're too old for that. So keep that in mind that those guys may have been on this list. But again, Yannick, Ian Frey, these guys are 23, 24 years old. They aren't 19, 20 like a lot of these players are supposed to be. So, and the other thing I wanted to say, if you go look at this list in 2025, a lot of the players are either aging out or they're repeating on this list. Obed Vargas, who won the award this year, he was number 7 last year. 3 of the top 6 players on this list were in the top 12 last season. So it is not a list where a guy gets on and then drops off. This is supposed to be a thing where if you get in at 19, 20, you're on there for the next 2 or 3 years. And that's not what's happened this season in Miami. So why is that the case? And that's what we wanted to talk about, because 5 of the best young players in MLS seems like a sign for a very healthy organization and roster construction and team, where you're getting a lot of young, healthy players coming in and providing either depth, impact, or can lock down a starting spot for the course of the season and be like a truly impactful player. So let's start with this. Is Inter Miami playing their young players enough?
Do you want the long answer or the short answer? Because the short answer that I can give you without even looking at the statistics is I don't believe so. No, Inter Miami is not playing its young players enough. Inter Miami is not utilizing its young players off the bench or from the starting 11. And it feels like we rely on the same core of 11 players to start every game week in, week out. And that to me is in itself an issue. But I think more so, the fact that we continue to rely on a set of 11 players means that there's a whole core of youth players who don't even get an opportunity off the bench. Scotty, you're the facts guy. Am I right or am I right?
You're right. I did go through all of the minutes played versus minutes available, and it is certainly not the trend compared to last year that you'd like to see. A lot of our really old players have played not just more minutes, but a higher percentage of minutes. For example, Sergio Busquets last year played 80% of minutes, was fully healthy the whole year, this year. He's played 92% of minutes this year, which is A, ridiculous, but B, that's taking minutes out of the pockets of young midfielders that could have used those minutes: David Ruiz, Yannick Bright, Benjamin Kramaski, Federico Redondo, etc. So, and I don't think last year we were saying Busquets isn't playing enough when he was playing 80% of the minutes. The same is true for Suarez and Messi and Jordi Alba. There has been a large uptick in how many minutes they are playing, which does mean there's less minutes for everyone else.
And I think there's another aspect to this, right? Yeah, of course, there's certain players who are playing more minutes, but I think there's also, do some of the players who are on the bench or not being utilized, do they deserve the minutes, right? And do we think as fans that our bench or our substitutes or our reserves or our players in our youth team at least deserve to play some minutes and have some contribution to this team? I think definitely. There are players on this team who can contribute in ways that I think will be for the better of this club, will allow us to rest some of our older players and have a mix of a good youth versus experience balance. But it doesn't feel like they've been given that opportunity. And I think there's definitely a case to be made that some of these players, maybe a Santi Morales, Benjamin Kramaski before he left, deserved to play more minutes. Alan Abondo deserved to play more minutes. So it's not just about handing them the opportunity just because they're young. I think it's also a matter of handing them the opportunity because I think there's enough talent there to have an actual impact on the way our season is going.
And I think not just do they deserve it, but do they deserve, like, is someone more deserving taking those minutes? And when we see, listen, Lionel Messi is better than any of these young players we have, period. But does he need to be playing 85% of minutes, or is 75% of minutes okay? And maybe Messi's the worst example because he's Lionel Messi, but for Busquets, is 80% of his minutes, of total minutes, sufficient? Or does he need to be out there 92% of minutes for you to win games? And I think last year we saw you don't actually need him out there virtually every minute of every game for the team to be successful. So starting with, can they be successful with more rotation? think the answer is unquestionably yes. And we saw that last year. And a lot of this conversation is probably going to be based on what we saw last year because we know it's possible because we just saw it. And not only that, you mentioned Santi Morales. It's a difficult one because we haven't seen it from Santi Morales yet, but we have seen it from David Ruiz. We have seen it from Benjamin Cremasco. Like, there are players that didn't get huge opportunities this year that we have seen it from. So from that perspective, I definitely think there was room for Inter Miami to give these kids more opportunities. And that probably extends past the guys that have already proven it to Santi Morales, to Alan Obando, to other guys. I went back and looked at some of the guys that have been quote unquote injured a lot this season to see how that affected their playing time. And I was pretty disappointed that they still didn't play more. Guys like David Ruiz, he's only played 181 minutes this year. I have him for 10 healthy, did not plays, which means he was healthy and still didn't see any minutes. Alan Obando, 3.9, he's played 181 minutes also. His last 10 healthy games, and I get he's injured all the time and he's never available. All of that I understand. His last 10 healthy games, he came off the bench once in the 90th minute of a 5-1 game against Columbus. That's 5 months of him playing 5 minutes. And he was not injured that entire time. He was available and he was not getting opportunities. So I definitely think there is almost without a doubt, there's a storyline here that Inter Miami has not given their young players enough minutes, and not just the total number of minutes, but appearances off the bench. And, I was really frustrated this past weekend when Inter Miami has a 4-0 lead, and in the 89th minute, they give Santi Morales 5 minutes, and they can't also throw on a Tyler Hall or one of the other two, Ricardo Montenegro or whatever, just to give them 5 minutes, which would be totally empowering for them and a really great experience. And instead, they just get left on the bench for no reason. I thought that was indicative of the mindset. It was a recent example, indicative of the mindset of Mascherano and the coaching staff, where getting these kids opportunities is clearly not a priority.
And, well, if my maths is correct, that's 10 games, 90 minutes per game, 900 minutes available, and he only plays, less than 5 minutes? I think that's the statistics are right there for us to see. Some people would not agree with the statistics that we try to point out. Of course, it's also about the eye test. How many times this season has it been really easy for the two of us to predict a starting 11? I don't even remember the number of times when you've asked me what the starting 11 is going to be, and I just copy paste the one that I sent across last time. And 99% of the times, it's literally the same. There's been not a single time that I can remember where I've looked at the lineup and been like, oh, wow, this is a new name on the team sheet, and I'm really excited to see this guy play. Dare I say, and maybe after this we can move on to the next talking point, if Inter Miami had actually utilized or given some of these youth players the time and the minutes, there's a case to be made whether they deserve to or not. I think Inter Miami as a team would have been a lot more healthy, and I don't mean in terms of the medical aspect, but healthy in the way that we view our team. The reliance on some of our older players to score the goals, to win us games, to win us the points, it would have been spread across the board. It would have allowed some of these youth players to get that experience, to play with the likes of Messi, with the likes of Rodrigo de Paul, to learn. This would not only be good for them overall in the long term as they try and build experience as professionals, but also I think for some of the players like Santi Morales, there was a real opportunity here to contribute to the impact that they can have on this team's season. And there's just been absolutely none of it. I thought when we first saw Santi Morales a couple of times in the preseason, for me, that was a genuine sign of he's going to be an integral part of this setup. And since then, there's barely been an opportunity for him to make any sort of an impact. And I'm totally against anyone who says that it's also about deserving the minutes. I think some of these youth players, you have to trust the youth to begin with and then see what they're capable of doing. And some of these youth players have the talent for them to at least get some minutes on this team, and they haven't had that at all.
Just quick diatribe or break, because Chris mentioned in the chat, we were talking about offline. got my Alan Obando kit with the with the pink one. So that's real. No, I think Santi Morales is a really interesting example, and I'm sure we'll come back to him. But every time he came on the field, we would go in the post game and say he looked good in his 12
Yeah.
minutes, you know? So there was nothing there that made you think, okay, he's not ready yet. Tyler Hall got a couple opportunities in the preseason, and we said the same thing. It's like he looks quick, he looks athletic. Like hopefully we get to see 500 minutes from him this year, and it's like not one single minute from him. And the reason I wanted to start with this talking point is because I think it goes to the mindset of the organization, the coaching staff. Is it a priority to give these kids opportunities to not just prove themselves, but improve on their ability? Because Santi Morales has played almost 4,000 minutes at the MLS Next Pro level. So has Tyler Hall. Like, they've done everything they're going to do at that level. And so you have to give them a chance to see if they're ready for this. And then, the same is true for guys like David Ruiz and everyone else that's sort of in that young player category. So the fact that we didn't really get them opportunities is
criminal.
I think it's indicative of the mindset. It's indicative of the mindset. Did they really care? And I want to start with like a quick conversation about coaching, because I think that's a huge part of it. Javier Mascherano came from a youth national team, and one of the things we sort of liked on paper about him, and of course what's on paper of a coach you've never really followed is totally misleading, is that he was supposed to, like, we thought he'd be really good with young players. And he knew a lot of our young players, Redondo and Toto Aviles and Kremet. Like, he had relationships with these guys that you thought might really help them blossom. But he was surrounded by young players. He was constantly scouting young players. He was constantly working with them to try and up their game. Like, that was what he was supposed to be doing. Now, maybe some of the legends of him not being great at his job, I think we feel maybe more confident that those are true. But regardless, like, that's what he was supposed to be, one of the things he was supposed to be good at. And you think back to Tata Martino, he had a reputation of never using young players and being constantly favoring older, more experienced veteran players. And Phil Neville, this was his first club job, so it's hard to tell. But Phil Neville, in a different situation, and Tata Martino clearly cared much more about giving young players opportunities and making sure they grow than what we've seen from Javier Mascherano. Do you agree, or do you think I'm off base?
No, I absolutely agree. And I bite my tongue now because when we were doing the preview, when Javier Mascherano got announced as Inter Miami coach, I think you and I both said at least one good thing that's going to come out of this is that he's actually going to play some of the youth players, because the only thing going for him as a coach in terms of credentials is the fact that he works with young players. And that's going to help some of our young players to grow, to develop their skills, to improve, to learn. And here we are a year later having a conversation about how player development at Inter Miami has been arrested. So I completely agree with you. Improving players, giving those young players the right ecosystem to develop and to build their skills has completely been lacking at Inter Miami. And I think you'll absolutely be right to say that the coaching has not been geared towards improving players. That has not been the intention of the coaching staff.
It hasn't prioritized it. And I think in order to be good at it, you absolutely have to prioritize it. It has to be something you think about constantly. Has to be like, it can't just go about your business. You have to have that be a focus of what you do on a regular basis.
Can I package that in a sentence that I've been thinking about since we started this episode? Youth development at a club it's a philosophy.
Yeah.
You have to have a philosophy of building youth. And we constantly talk about this when we deal with young players. The one thing that's missing in young players is consistency. So you can't treat them as the same level as someone like a Messi, Suarez, who you will continue to play, or a player who's 25, 26, who you might take off if he doesn't have a good game. With young players, you're either all in or you're not. And the example that I go to in this case is Alan Abondo. Yes, he's been injured for the longest time this season, but in his second game, he scored a goal. How is it that he's available for 10 games and you don't utilize him even once? There's a player there. This is an opportunity for him to actually bring out his skills. And he's shown that he's more than capable of scoring goals for this team. and you don't use him at all, that for me is an absolute crime. And it doesn't show any intent towards improving players.
And now I'm getting speculative, but I imagine that part of helping young players grow and building trust in them so that you are willing to put them on the field is building great relationships with them, from a player to a coach.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we saw that in 2025. I think based on a lot of sort of tidbits that have come out, tidbits that we've heard, and sort of reading the tea leaves on a few controversies here and there, it definitely doesn't feel like Mascherano has made having great relationships with these guys as a huge priority. And I think that's really important in American sports. I think we see it across the sporting landscape. I can't comment on what it's like in Spain or Germany, but I know in America that is a huge aspect of it. Whether it's minor league baseball or college football or college basketball, like that is a huge aspect of the player development process. You have to have trust in your coach so that when your coach is talking to you about how you can improve, you're fully bought in. And that's not just a normal expectation. It's something that is built over time. Then you also have to be good at it, helping players get better. And that's not, I don't think I would be good at it. Like, I'm not suggesting it's easy.
I'd be great at it.
But I also don't think we've seen a lot of evidence that they're good at it. And there have been young players that have played for Inter Miami this year, of course, and real minutes. And I don't know if we've seen a ton of improvement from those players. So we did an episode maybe 3 weeks ago, kind of looking at all, maybe it was like 6 weeks ago. I don't know. My sense of time is gone with this season. We looked at sort of every young 24 and under player or something like that over the course of the season and whether they actually got better. And basically our takeaway was not really. And that's tough. And I do think that's a reflection on the coaching staff. Really, I'll give credit to Yannick Bright, but I think it's easy to put that on him just being a professional for the first time over the last year and a half, whereas a lot of these other guys are in professional environments since they're 14. Noah Allen has been really good this year, but I'm not sure he's better now than he was 7 months ago. Ian Frey has finally had a great season because he stayed healthy, although we can talk about some of the minutes there too because they are crazy considering where our mindset is now. But I'm not sure he's a better player than he was 6 months ago or 8 months ago when the season started. And in fact, I think maybe in some ways he's less of an impactful player. And then we talk about Benjamin Kramaski and Redondo and David Ruiz and Santi Morales and Alan Obando and all these other guys. And I don't know if you see players that have improved from February 2025 to the middle of October 2025.
And yes, that's a completely valid argument to make for the young players. I think Noah Allen is case in point here. Noah Allen starting getting very good at his center-back role this time last season. I think slightly before. September 2024 was when we were starting to see Noah Allen actually flourish into the kind of player that he's become today. But I think since then, his performance levels have been very consistently good. But he's still very young. He still has a lot of room to grow. I think the gap between where he can be and where he is still quite high. The fact that he's playing with the likes of Jordi Alba, Sergio Busquets, Lionel Messi, learning from them has obviously helped him. But I think you're absolutely right to point out that since last season and let's say October 2024 to October 2025, I think Noah Allen has been the same good player that we saw him be, and he hasn't actually gotten better than that. Ian Frey, you made a very good point. I think Yannick Bright as well has, I wouldn't say hit a wall, but he's demonstrated skill sets, but still hasn't broken the ceiling the way we would want him to. I think there's another aspect to this which relates to some of the players who are in the 23-24 age bracket, and maybe this is deviating away from the conversation, but stay with me for a second, because player improvement is not just about the youth, right? It's not just about the 18, 19-year-olds. Players can improve within a certain system, even when they're 26, 27, 28. I know the the range to improve is obviously limited in that case. But the likes of Gonzalo Lujan, who's 24, there are holes in his game that you can glaringly witness as fans. And I think the fact that the coaching staff has not been able to plug them or at least get him to improve at certain aspects of his game it's a statement and a half. Tadeo Allende, I
Yeah,
think, has
yeah.
been the same level of player.
I think that's a great point. The lack of improvement, I think, is not just with the really young players,
No,
but
it's
it's also
across the board. There you
it's
go.
across the board, and maybe even some regression. I mentioned
Mm-hmm.
Ian Frey. I think you might be able to make some arguments there. I think Chelo Wagon's gotten worse over the
Yeah.
course of this season.
Yeah.
He's a guy that's in his mid-20s. I don't think Maxi Falcone or Gonzalo Luan are also guys that have shown a ton. Today, Allende, another one. So
Velasco Segovia.
it's not just maybe Telasco Segovia is the one you could argue, but again, in the last 5 months since the Club World Cup, I certainly wouldn't say that. And it is, I think, imperative for the coaching staff to constantly working on with these guys. And listen, part of it is just giving them opportunities, but part of it's the backroom stuff. In fact, most of it's the backroom stuff. You go play 20 minutes, and Silvetti's first appearance in Inter Miami, he's just running around crazy for 15 minutes, and he has a moment where he looks good, and then a moment where he looks lost, and then a moment where he looks confused, and then a moment where he looks great again. And it's like, yes, perfect. You go into the video room, and you watch it, and you break down with your coaching staff what happened in every single run, every single minute of your 15-minute appearance, and you work on things, and you go home and study and sort of try and implement them into your mindset for the next game. And then you get dramatically better and dramatically better. And so, A, you have to give these kids opportunities to get minutes, but B, you also have to have that relationship that I'm talking about to go back into the film room, into the practice pitch, to work on things to get better. And even for the guys that are playing a ton, like Tadeo Allende, Lujan, Falcone, all these guys we just mentioned, Chelo Wagon, Ian Frey, compared to what we saw both under Phil Neville and with Tata Martino, it feels like they're worse this year at like taking their minutes and turning them into positive progression.
I don't think anyone can say that the environment around the players is conducive for them to improve and get better. They're not in an ecosystem where you can say there is room for all of these players to grow, whether it's some players having a poor run of form. Today, Allende had a poor run of form for almost 15 games, maybe more. And you could see that player was suffering. And I don't think he still reached the same levels that he started at this season. The environment in and around players is just not conducive enough for them to improve. And you and I don't think can even pick a single player that has genuinely been better this season than they were last season.
And Sean says something in the chat that I think is maybe relevant to clarify. He says you can't teach something to someone until they see their own failures. And that's part of the relationship that I'm talking about behind the scenes. And of course, I don't know what Javier Mascherano's relationship with Alan Obando is. So I can't speak on that, or the strikers coach or the assistant coach, whoever is responsible for that. I can't speak on the relationship, obviously. But the signs don't show like it's someone who is totally bought in, is fully prepped every day to come in and get better, which is what you have to be at the professional level. And that is, with guys that are 18 to 22, as much on the coaches as it is the players. Once you start hitting 21, 22, 23, okay, fine. You're a full professional. You're making a lot of money. You can you shoulder more of the responsibility. But with the younger guys, like that is absolutely on the coaches, more than the players, in my opinion. So an interesting point. I just wanted to clarify on that.
I would like to walk my words back because Pep in the chat makes a very good point. Messi has been better this season than he has last season. So there is one player we can say who's definitely on the upward trajectory. But I think that's down to him, not Javi Mascherano.
I actually don't think Messi's been better this year. He's just played more. But I think his total number of goal contributions is slightly down. Although I do think he's more consistent this year.
Yeah.
Not the point. He's been great both years. So that's not what this is all about. Okay, so we've kind of locked in that the coaching staff maybe isn't prioritizing giving kids opportunities. And then maybe also we have some evidence that behind the scenes, they're not actually particularly good at helping kids get better. So let's talk about the organization as a whole, because they have talked about since before the first game, there's three sort of pillars of what they want Inter Miami to be. And one of them was being in Miami. One of them was the global superstar aspect. But the other was taking advantage of the fact that South Florida is one of the recruiting hotbeds and building an academy. Remember, David Beckham, Manchester United, it's one of the two most famous academies in the world. He came through at Manchester United. And the other one, Barcelona, by the way, which is hugely influential in everything that happens in Inter Miami. So you would imagine that they would have a ton of thought, of time devoted. They would understand that the culture has to be geared towards using the academy and helping young players come through. And I think we've seen a little bit of a lack in that with their recruitment policy as well, specifically in the last 12 months, since the Tata Martino, Chris Henderson regime left, and this new, whoever the sporting director is, based on whatever month it was.
Wait, it's not Raul Sanyehi anymore?
Yeah, and Javier Mascherano, this brain trust has seemingly decided that that's not important. And their recruitment policy has been geared towards that. And I think that's really frustrating. You made a great point, and maybe this is the worst of examples, but I think it's maybe the most illustrative. So let's just roll with it for a minute about Rodrigo de Paul. Do you want to? It was your point, so I want you to sort of have the limelight on it.
So my understanding was that when Rodrigo de Paul was brought in, that one move by itself, of course, geared towards making this team impressive in terms of winning the league, impressive in terms of winning trophies, taking the ceiling in terms of talent much higher than it is. But in that one stroke, the front office completely took away the opportunities of 4 players in the midfield. By bringing in a superstar like Rodrigo de Paul, who is going to demand the minutes, who's going to play game in, game out, you've essentially said that you're going to sacrifice the youth development of 4 players. Now, I'm not saying that's the right thing to do or that's the wrong thing to do. It's just facts. And we've seen that as evidence with Federico Redondo leaving, with Benjamin Kramaski leaving, with Yannick Bright being relegated to the bench, and David Ruiz getting no minutes at all. Now, we can debate whether that was the right thing to do or whether that was detrimental to the health of the club itself. And we can be on different spectrums here, but there's no denying that in that one move, the recruitment decision has completely killed off the time that would be available to 4 players.
Yeah, and David Ruiz almost left in the summer as well. So you could have brought in 1 player and moved out 3 young players that all have potential and promise. Now, listen, part of it is like maybe these kids weren't getting better. They need to move to a different developmental environment. Just getting minutes with this coaching staff is actually not improving them. And I think maybe that's like a part of it. So it's not that they should have said no to Rodrigo de Paul in the moment. It's just that like if your philosophy was we're going to get the most out of our young, super talented young midfielders, they would have been doing more back in January and February to get more out of them so that they would be ready to explode into better moves, and then you can bring in Rodrigo de Paul. I think another example is at center back. You have Ian Frey, you have Noah Allen, and you have Toto Aviles on the roster last winter, where you can maybe add 1 veteran to that list. And instead, you bring in 2 middle-of-the-road center backs. You prefer them for much of the season, and I do have the minutes breakdown.
You pay them a bunch of money so that they demand to be starters and not bench pieces, by the way.
You pay them a bunch of money so that they can be starters and not bench pieces. And then you end up, listen, I get Ian Frey, Noah Allen force their way into roles, but you also should have known what you had on hand before making those decisions. And then Toto Aviles absolutely gets relegated. Just for an example, last year, Toto Aviles played 76% of Inter Miami's minutes, and we talked about consistently how he was getting better month after month after month after month. Over 3,000 minutes for him last year. This year, less than half that, and only 32% of game time, 31.8%. He's been a healthy scratch 14 times. That's a player who you went out, messed up his future, messed up a lot of his value, I'll also add, because you wanted to bring in a couple sort of middle of the road type starters in the MLS in Falcone and Gonzalo Lujan, and you never even saw him do one training session. But you could have seen all the film that you needed from last year. So that's like another example of this coaching staff, this front office, they did not prioritize giving these kids opportunities, not just after they saw them, but before any of them ever had a single training session with their guys. And then ended up being proven that actually these guys have to play. Like, they're not good enough. My guys that I brought in aren't good enough, so I have to play these young kids. And you wasted a ton of money. You wasted a ton of your cap space in the pursuit. I think it's kind of crazy in retrospect, especially for someone that doesn't know the league, doesn't know Inter Miami, doesn't know the U.S. market. Like, it's crazy.
And for me, that I think is the most egregious offense. You said the Rodrigo de Paul example is the worst. I think Toto Aviles is the worst of the examples.
To be clear, I meant Redondo.
Cases.
De Paul's like the worst example.
Yeah.
Because he's Rodrigo de Paul.
Yeah.
Toto Aviles is probably the best example. But, there was a bunch of other guys. Leo Alfonso never got an opportunity.
Just to play devil's advocate for a second, right? Because somebody is going to say, listen, Redondo got his move to Europe. Kramaski got his move to Europe. I don't think any of that was the intention behind it, because Rodrigo de Paul coming in, Redondo demanded to move.
Oh, no, yeah.
They had to find him they had to find him a club. It wasn't planned like Diego Gomez was. Diego Gomez was one that you saw the talent and you were like, we've done all that we could in this player's development. It's time for him to move on. That was not the case for Kramaski. That was not the case for Federico Redondo. Now, you could say we reached our limit with Redondo. He was not going to get better at the ceiling that he was currently at. And that's why bringing in Rodrigo de Paul was much better. I completely agree, 100%. But I think there's just an overarching philosophical intention behind how some of the recruitments have been made, which in itself is detrimental to the entire concept of promoting youth and playing with the youth. So the third pillar that you talk about, having a robust academy, allowing the players from the academy a pathway into the first team. I think with the kind of recruitment policy that you've been employing, which I think is going to continue at least for the near future, itself just completely shutters out that pathway from the academy into the first team. And that I think is quite sad, honestly.
Yeah, and listen, it's not just about bringing in new players. It's also like playing formations and allowing guys to play in the ways that are going to help them develop. Kramaski, if you look at his number of minutes this year, it's a solid number of minutes, like 1,800 or something like that. But a lot of it was as a winger. A lot of it was not as a box-to-box midfielder. And so you bring in DePaul, you have to play Busquets, except you're playing Busquets more than you really need to. You're playing DePaul more than you really need to. And you're only playing a two-man midfield. It becomes very difficult to get minutes to guys, not just Kramaski and Ruiz, but even a Yannick Bright or a Federico Redondo. You lose all of their opportunity to grow. And, Toto Aviles, he has played 1,300 minutes or whatever this season, but it's never been consistent. And so that's the other thing that is a part of this is if you're playing once a month, you're really going to struggle to grow.
And for me, I think there's two aspects to this when it comes to pathways. When your recruitment policy is directly detrimental and a hindrance to the development of youth, I think that's a problem in the way you're approaching the club.
And
they should be parallel to one another, not going head to head against each other.
And it goes back to the mindset. As we've mentioned many times on here, if you want your culture to be, we're going to have young players and help them develop, it has to be part of everything you do. And clearly we're seeing signs that that's not taken into account all over the place. And so it's not just one example here. It's not just the Rodrigo de Paul. It's not just what we feel about Alan Obondo's season. It's everything shows sort of a lack of consideration for this aspect that not only is genuinely important across world soccer, but you've said is one of your pillars as a club. I will add, I have not heard David Beckham or Jorge Mas or Jose Mas mention these three pillars or the academy and developing players in the last 18 months. Make of that what you will, but
And you
I
know
think it
what,
is something.
right? It's a domino effect because you come in, you bring in this new coach. Your idea is to continue to play with the youth, with superstar players, integrate them together into a team. Then you lose your first trophy, then you lose your second trophy, then you lose your third trophy. Your back is against the wall. And I think at this point in time, Javi Marciano is struggling for air. And what he does, and I think what any coach would do in that situation when the expectations are so high and you've been unable to meet them, is rely on the players that you trust the most. And he's going to rely on the players that have constantly proven that they're the best in the world. So you rely on them more and more, which takes away and chips away the minutes of some of the younger players. Case in point, when you're winning the game 3-1, they're still in the back of your mind. Last week, we let up 2 goals when we were 2 goals up and we lost points. We can't do that again. So when we have some minutes available for the youth, that's going to get taken away and you're going to try and see the game off. So those things actually play into it. And when you promise the fans you're going to win trophies and when you don't deliver on that promise, the expectations get really high. And then you're fighting for your job, which let's be honest, Javi Mascherano has been. It comes at the cost of sacrificing the time and the minutes for the youth. I
Which
don't
means
agree with that.
your principles, right?
Your principles.
I was looking through the average age of every lineup earlier today from last year and this year, and I did think one thing was interesting. The oldest lineup Inter Miami put out in either 2025 or 2024, and potentially ever in Inter Miami history, was in the Leagues Cup final against Seattle. So when it was the most important and you had the final at your fingertips, Mascherano didn't trust any of the kids. He was almost 31 years old, average age of the starting 11. So, and that was the oldest I could find for an Inter Miami
And I
roster.
promise you, if he had just sprinkled that youthful energy across the entire season, doesn't need to play 6 of the youth academy players or the young players at the same time. 1 or 2 here or there. Make sure everyone's ready. Make sure everyone's on their toes. The ecosystem around the club would be so much more healthy right now. We would be in a better place, both in terms of points, in terms of challenging for trophies, and in terms of how we feel about this team. And I promise you that would not have been the case, and the season would have gone differently.
And it also goes back to the relationships I think you have with young players. Is that if you have a great relationship with Alan Obondo, you're gonna want to see him succeed, and you're gonna find ways
Exactly.
to make it happen. So, to me, all of this points to actually the biggest issue, which I think with the young players on this team, I don't know if there's a great relationship with Javier Mascherano's coaching staff, and I definitely think we've seen tidbits and heard tidbits throughout the season that indicate that. Okay. Pepto asks, I'm of the opinion that academy kids shouldn't be going straight to the first team unless they're top tier talent. I want to have a conversation about the academy, but I wanted to make sure we included the players they've brought in. We don't know what's going to happen with Matteo Silvetti. He's played 80 minutes for Inter Miami. Baltasar Rodriguez, he's in a very early stage of his Inter Miami career, so we'll see. It's too early to say anything on those guys. That said, I think we've done justice to the conversation about the players that are already on the first team. I think it would be doing a great disservice to not talk about the academy because Inter Miami had this sort of golden generation and come out of the academy that are now ages 20 to 22. And we saw it in 2023 when they broke the record for the most number of homegrown academy players on the field at the same time. And there's that famous picture with all 6 of them lined up. They were all on the field at the same time. It was a great feeling, and everyone felt awesome about it. And those guys broke through in 2023 or earlier and were like established parts of the first team before Messi came, before Tata Martino came. And that was Noah Allen, Ian Frey, Benjamin Kramaski, David Ruiz, and I think maybe that's it, unless I'm forgetting someone. Throw in Leo Alfonso, who was a super draft pick in 2024. Throw in Yannick Bright. But
Did you mention Ian Frey?
I did mention Ian Frey. They had all proven themselves as homegrown talents before any of the new era of Inter Miami started. And when they were 18 and 19, it was really awesome because they provided all this youth and talent and energy and excitement for the fans and stories that the fans could fall in love with, these young players that are local and from Pembroke Pines and from Miami Beach and et cetera. But now that they're 20 to 22, they're starting to get moves abroad. We saw that with Benjamin Kramaski. They're starting to get their second contracts, which is great for them, but they're going to start getting international caps. You look at Noah Allen and his Greek adventure. You're looking at Ian Frey with Jamaica. Like, these are becoming established players, and they're no longer those like young kids that are just young and hungry. Not young and hungry, but missing. And now I'm worried about the next age bracket, the 18 and 19-year-olds who aren't coming through, even though they've been signed to first-team contracts. Santi Morales played, I did the research.
Less than 90 minutes.
Santi Morales has played 51 minutes this season as a guy that, if this was last year, and by the way, what I did was I looked at all the minutes for every player this year and gave my direct comparison to last season. And my direct comparison for Santi Morales this year was Leo Alfonso last year. Leo Alfonso played 323 minutes. That's 7 times as much as Santi Morales played this year. And Leo Alfonso missed a month last month of the year with an injury, and didn't get signed for the first 6 weeks because he hadn't gotten his first-team contract yet.
On the topic of Santi Morales, can I just say before I forget, people raved a lot about Baltazar Rodriguez in his debut in our chat. People raved a lot about Silvetti in his debut in our chat. I think Santi Morales, when he played in that preseason game, looked better than the both of them. And his ability on the ball, the way he was controlling it, I'm not saying he's a better player or not. I think he shows a spark. He shows something to all Inter Miami fans where you think to yourself, damn, there's a player here. And the fact that he's getting no more than 51 minutes is absolutely criminal. This was definitely a player who could have played in that number 10 position on the wing, wherever you want him to play, honestly, and gotten more minutes this season than he has.
Can I make a comparison? And this is going to be low for everyone. Like, I'm sorry if this is too detailed for some people, but there's a guy in Columbus Crew, same age as Santi Morales, same-ish position, is an attacking midfielder named Taha Habrun. He was listed as the number 22 player in this under 22 list. They were on the same US U17 World Cup roster a couple years ago that Santi started on, and I think they were starting in the midfield together. He's played 565 minutes this year for the Columbus Crew, who are not bottom feeders. They're a team that was expecting to compete. They're a team that's well-run with a great coach, all that stuff.
Making the playoffs.
And making the playoffs, 565 minutes. So if he had gotten Santi had gotten half of that, I think we've been happy. And again, when we saw Santi, I think we were all thinking, okay, this is a guy we'd like to see more of.
Absolutely.
Is he totally ready? I don't know. But we certainly saw enough to think he deserves more opportunities.
50 minutes is nothing.
It's nothing. Especially when there's it's 6 appearances. So you're talking about
exactly. It's spread over 6 games. It's
okay. It's not just Santi Morales, though, because clearly he's maybe the closest. I think we saw Tyler Hall give us something. I think we saw Israel Boatwright 2 years ago. Now, Israel Boatwright's had a couple injuries that have hampered his ability to play, including an ACL tear in 2024. But I think he's played, the most amount of senior team minutes back in 2023 and probably looked the most ready. I would have been shocked in 2023 after his first couple appearances if you told me he wasn't going to be at least the backup right back in 2025. And here he is, not even being a consideration for the first team. But it's not just those 3 who were lucky enough, maybe lucky is the right word, to get those first team contracts before Chris Henderson and that cohort of people moved on. But you've got Brian Destin, you've got other 18-year-olds, and coming up through the system, 17-year-olds that are very talented. And this is something that people that aren't in South Florida might not know. This is one of the best hotbeds of talent in the country. And so I'm telling you right now, there's 1, 2, 3 kids in every single age group that should be coming through and being MLS players. Are all of them going to stick and have 15-year careers? No. Some of them are going to end up being like, his name's totally escaping me. Edison Ascona.
Edson Ascona.
Who plays 15 games over 2 years and then goes and plays in the USL and plays for the Dominican Republic. Like, still going to have a good career. It doesn't have to be at Inter Miami. But that kid was worth signing and giving an opportunity and seeing what he had. And he's going on to have a nice professional soccer career. There's going to be 1, 2, 3 guys in every single age group that are going to be that for Inter Miami. And Inter Miami should be on top of that. And by the way, they need to be getting better at that because they weren't good enough already. Alex Freeman, who's a right back for Orlando City, is from South Florida. He was in Inter Miami's sort of zone region. Inter Miami didn't go out and get that kid when he was a teenager.
And now he's a U.S. men's national team prospect.
And he's a U.S. men's national team player that might be going to the World Cup next year. And by the way, he was the number 2 player on the U20, the 22 under 22 list. They've already weren't doing enough, and it feels like they're regressing. And I will just tell you, national observers and national scouts, they think Inter Miami's group that's like in that 15, 16-year-old range is one of the best in the country. And so Inter Miami's at a point where a guy like Brian Destin might have already lost his opportunity at Inter Miami because Inter Miami wasn't on top of that. They can't risk having this same structure in place when these really good prospects come through because they're supposed to be exceptional. If Inter Miami can't do right by them, they're going to leave, and they should leave, and it's going to be Inter Miami's detriment.
And there's a caveat here, right? Because I think you've mentioned this, but we maybe need to hammer this point home. Not all of these youth players are going to make it into the first team. Someone's going to be like, oh yeah, but they're probably not good enough with the quality of players that we already have. Like, no number 10 coming from the youth academy is going to get minutes over Messi right now. But that's not the point of this conversation. The point is that there's enough talent here for us to be able to mine the future of this team. Messi is not going to be on this team for the rest of eternity. He's going to be here 1 year, 2 years max. You have to think about the system and the pathway that goes from one to the next, that goes from under 10s to under 15s to under 18s, then the first team. When you don't have a pathway where you can demonstrate that a lot of these players will have the opportunity, at least, not a guaranteed slot, an opportunity to make a name for themselves in the first team, they're going to go and look at opportunities elsewhere. They're going to look at your Columbus Crews, your Cincinnatis. They're going to think, okay, maybe I have a better chance of playing in that particular club. So at the under 15 level, they just make a pivot. And then you miss out on a gem of a player that could eventually become the future of your black backline, for instance. So yes, not all of them will end up being diamonds, but that doesn't mean that you don't have the pathway at least to at least explore the possibility of bringing in the talent into the first team.
Yes. And I want to be clear. Sean made a comment that I want to just reread. Tyler Hall should have started at least 2 games this year. Destin should have seen playing time. Israel Boatwright should have coming off the injury, should have played some minutes. We're not saying they need to play 1,500 minutes. We're not saying they need to be lock-in starters. We're just saying they should be getting some opportunities so that we can see what they actually are. And going back to our overall point, or at least my overall point from this conversation, the coaching staff and I think also the front office has lost sight of how important it is to be giving these kids opportunities.
It's short-sighted rather than a long-term approach.
And I don't know if they have the ability, like I don't know if they have the talent to do this as coaches, but I think it's pretty clear that they don't have the mindset right now that it's important. There's a kid I want to mention, Justin Ellis, who's one of Orlando City's bright young prospects. He's a striker. He was at the Inter Miami Academy and left because he didn't like the pathway that Inter Miami put in front of him. So Inter Miami is going to lose kids like this if they don't do a better job. And again, that's important because Inter Miami is in the heartbed of one of the best talent regions in this country. So this isn't Portland. This isn't, Minnesota. This is South Florida, where athletes are, around every corner.
And you're going to lose that, man.
Okay, there's one last question. We also have a couple quick things that we haven't talked about yet, but it goes back to that comment I mentioned earlier from Pepto. He says, I'm of the opinion the academy shouldn't, kids from the academy shouldn't be going straight to the first team unless they're top tier talent. Is the aim to be a top club or not? And I think it asks one really important question we haven't mentioned yet. Yes, Jorge Mas and David Beckham said they want player development and the youth academy to be one of the pillars of Inter Miami. Yes, we've had some real recent success. And so as fans, I think we see the potential. But ultimately, the goal is to win the MLS Cup and to win the CONCACAF Champions Cup.
Yeah, win the trophies.
And be the best team in the league. And so I guess my question is, does it even matter? Because Inter Miami objectively is going to finish with a point total that starts with a 6, which is historically representative of a great season in the MLS. Went to the second round of the Club World Cup, Leagues Cup final, CONCACAF Champions Cup semifinal. On paper, they had a great season without doing all of this. Is this the difference between them having a great season and them being what they were last season or even better? Maybe, but it was a great season. So does any of this even matter is, I guess, the question.
I think 100%. You've got the short-sighted element of this where you're saying, we want to win a trophy as soon as possible while Messi is still here. I agree with you. I think you have to maximize and optimize how much time Messi has on this team to make sure we can win anything and everything there is available to win. You may be able to buy the success over the next 2 years, but that should not come at the detriment of ruining what the long-term plan of this team would be. I go back to my point. Messi is not going to be here in 2 years, in 3 years, right? He's eventually going to retire. When he does, this club still needs to sustain itself. And I don't think the model that we're employing right now, where we go out and buy global superstars and make sure we get big name players from around the world to try and win us the cup, is going to be sustainable in the future. The way the MLS is structured, the way the buying works here, player recruitment works here, you have to build a whole ecosystem of talent in and around your global superstars to get the best out of the season. And I think last season we had a really good balance between giving youth an opportunity and having some global superstars with Messi, Suarez, Busquets, and Alba. But this season we've lost complete sight of that. Now, we may still be able to win the MLS Cup, but it's not guaranteed by any means. So that means your entire model of trying to bring in the best players around the world in one team has not worked. The sustainable way to get the results is by peppering your talent with youth and allowing the long-term success of the club to dictate what the short-term success is going to be. You can't destroy that pathway, because if you do, then you may win a trophy, one trophy this year, maybe one trophy next year, but then that club is going to suffer for a long time once the global superstars leave.
Well, I think you missed the biggest point. This is a salary cap league. You can't buy
Exactly.
17 global superstars. You can't. You can. I mean, Inter Miami's found a way to squeeze 5 of them on the roster. You're not supposed to have more than 3. So, and by the way, think about how many times this year anyone that's not Inter Miami fan has watched one game and said, why can't they run? Why have no athleticism? Why don't they just surround Messi with a bunch of young guys that are hungry and athletic and capable? And the answer is because they haven't developed those. And by the way, they can only buy so many young players. In fact, they found a way to get more young players from overseas on this roster than they're supposed to be having also, right? By loopholes like having Alan Obando and Segovia on loan for a year. Not Segovia, Baltasar on loan for a year. They've really gamed the system, and they still don't have a complete roster. And in order to get a complete roster, you have to bring kids through. And for Inter Miami specifically, who is, again, sitting on the hotbed of all hotbeds in the U.S., it's criminal not to do this. It's like being Barcelona and not bringing kids through the academy. It's like being Manchester United and not bringing kids through the academy. That's what Inter Miami can be in the MLS. And it starts by prioritizing it. And it does not feel like this coaching staff and this front office cares about it. And it feels like the day they switched over from the Tata Martino and Chris Henderson front office coaching staff combination to this one, whatever the names are, whoever you want to associate it with, that stopped being a priority. And it needs to change. And I will say this, losing 1 year like they've done is bad. But you can't let this be the trend. You have to fix it now. So I'm very nervous.
And I know this will sound like a biased conversation to a lot of our regular listeners because you and I have a special place in our heart for the youth of this team. We've always been a lot more biased towards that. We always give them a lot more leeway as well. But I think it's right to say that the youth is the heart and soul of a team. When Ian Frey goes out and gets 2 goals against Columbus, we feel a lot happier than when Messi would score a hat-trick, I think. Well, that would be great because he doesn't do that enough either. But the youth system dictates how healthy a club is. It gives you an indication of what the systems in and around the players are, what the environment is, how players are blossomed and given an opportunity to improve and prove themselves. When that system and ecosystem and environment crumbles, no matter how much talent you have in your experienced players, no matter how many superstars you bring in, if the system in and around them is not correct, is not healthy, the team is not going to function and flourish. And I think that's what we're seeing with Inter Miami this season, where we've sort of on the verge of losing the identity that we have as a club, bringing in the youth. If this goes on for another season, I think it's going to be the death of the academy.
And I think it starts like everywhere. Like the coach doesn't seem to really emphasize this. The front office doesn't seem to really emphasize this. We've mentioned some clues. We've heard some other things that probably we shouldn't be saying on the podcast. But like, this is a real problem. And I think a lot of Inter Miami fans think it will probably be really healthy to change coaching staffs this year. Not just because of the results, but because of the relationships and a lot of different reasons. But that cultural change, I think, needs to go up through the front office as well. Even if they don't fire people publicly and make a big show of it, the culture shift has to really change. So,
and the priority is trophies. That's why this is happening. They want immediate win. They want to make this happen as soon as possible. But that's not how you're going to win trophies.
I disagree. I don't think they care. And I think you brought in a bunch of people that have never been in the U.S. That have never been in South Florida. No, I know. And like I said, like I was trying to say, or about to say, you brought in a lot of people that have never been in the MLS, that have never been in South Florida, that are here for the ride. And I don't know if they've really prioritized this in a way that any football club should, and especially any football club with ambitions to be a top club. Because again, do you want to be a top club? You know who has a top academy? Man City and Chelsea, and PSG, and Barcelona. And it's like, you go up and down the list, and the academies are great. And then, anyways, there are some other things we should talk about. Is there anything else you want to mention on the topic before we switch?
No, I think this has been a cathartic conversation. I know you've been waiting to have this conversation for a while, so I'm glad you were able to get things off your chest, but we may have a couple of quick hitters on the side. So let's get to those, and then we can move on to the last game of the season, man.
Okay, Matteo Silvetti, who with the Argentine U20 team, won the semifinal game for Argentina with the game-winning goal. They beat Colombia 1-0 a couple days ago, or maybe it was last night. And Silvetti was the difference. He scored the goal, 71st minute, I believe. Nice goal. He is entering the box. The defender steps up to, I don't know the players, but steps up to the number 10, let's say. He puts the pass into Silvetti, and Silvetti with the finish as some guys are crashing in on him. And that's the difference. He's really come on to be like one of the key pieces for that Argentine U20 team. So congratulations to him. We knew over the weekend, once they qualified for the semifinal, that he wasn't going to be here for Saturday's game against Nashville. So now that you're there, go win the whole thing. And that would be awesome. But not just is he advancing, he's starring. So congratulations
That's
to
actually
Mateo.
really good to see because I feel like he's going to come back in a vein of really good confidence and form. And he might actually help us get to the final of the MLS Cup and maybe score then. Who knows?
I should have looked this up before, so this is bad podcasting. But I know early in the tournament he was a guy that was coming off the bench. I don't know if he still is. I know he scored a couple goals, but most of them have been. They've all been in the second half, I think. So I don't know if he's still coming off the bench. Maybe someone in the chat knows. But if he
not.
is,
He was
not.
only benched against Australia. He played every single game after that, I think.
not
Started. I believe he started them. Yeah.
Okay,
I can
then-
double check.
Well, Pepto says he still is. Either way, I think there could be a real role for him as a second half player coming into this playoffs. I almost don't think you can start him in game one because he hasn't been around the team, but this gives me the confidence that he's going to be an impactful player when he comes back off the bench. And then the other thing, which I think is bigger, is David Ruiz gets his new contract. As we mentioned, Inter Miami's now, that generation's getting new contracts. They still have to get Ian Frey done, who's actually out of contract this year. Yannick Bright, less urgent, but they need to get him a new contract at some point this offseason. These guys are really important. David Ruiz has not been a huge part of this season, and he still gets the new contract. Maybe before Inter Miami had to give him the new contract. A lot of things, as Sean mentions in the chat, a lot of times Inter Miami has done this. They've moved the player on soon after. Bryce Duke, Kamal Miller, Robert Taylor, like almost everyone. Even throwing Kramaski now. So I don't know if this secures his future at Inter Miami. I kind of have a hard time seeing him still being on the team next year if it's the same coaching staff. But he's going to get paid more, whether he gets traded somewhere in the MLS. He's the third homegrown, I believe, to get that second contract after Kramaski and Noah Allen. So congratulations to him.
But for how long?
I feel bad because I really like David Ruiz, both as a player and as a homegrown. So I want him to be around. But this is historically, like, I don't want to make this about him leaving because he did just sign a contract. I want to celebrate
honestly,
it.
he deserves it. He deserves this contract because he's been good for this team for every time he's been on the pitch, except
again,
the red
last
card
year-
against Monterrey.
Yeah. Again, last year he was 22 under 22.
And he's
In
played
the
every
22,
single
20
he's played so many different roles for this team. Midfield, winger, left back, or right back. He's played a lot of different roles and he's been a very good utility player. And
he's
you
a
can
good
only
midfielder
reward
too.
him for that.
And
Yeah.
I want to be clear. Like, I remember when it was him, Kramaski, and Dixon Arroyo manning our midfield. And sure,
The
we
good
didn't
old
win a lot
days.
of games. Sure, we didn't win a lot of games. But those two were like two of the brightest sparks in that team. And then Ian Frey came back from injury, and he was a great spark. And like Noah Allen and his goal against DC, like, I do fondly remember even when we were losing, it was the young guys that were exciting and fun and
Yeah.
you had hope for. So I will always appreciate those guys because they gave me something to be excited about when the rest of the team really wasn't. So that's what I got on the agenda. Is there anything else? Should I look and see if anything's happened over the last hour?
It's been a ride, man. The season has almost come to an end, at least the regular season. And I didn't think we'd be having this exact conversation when Javi Mascherano came on as a coach. But alas, here we are as a team. And it's a sad state of affairs that our youth system hasn't necessarily produced this year. I hope this is just an anomaly and we get back to having a better pathway for some of our youth into the first team next year. But we shall see. I think important marker to keep an eye out for because the health of the youth system determines the health of the club, in my opinion. And I think this is going to be an important indication of where this club is going in the future.
There is one other thing that happened this week that I don't know if it really is relevant to Inter Miami, but Messi created this youth tournament called the Messi Cup. It's an under-16 tournament, and it's got clubs really big clubs come into Miami to play Inter Miami. Chelsea, Man City, Inter Milan, Barcelona, Atletico Madrid, River Plate, and those old boys as an Inter Miami are going to be like in an 8-team tournament. So for Inter Miami's U16, that's
Great
like
opportunity.
an awesome experience. Yeah. And
Yeah.
as I've mentioned, they have some really good players. By the way, I was just looking at one of my conversations with someone who does scouting of the youth prospects, high school age prospects, and they just rave about these kids that are like 14, 15, 16 from Inter Miami. And I will be so sad if those kids don't reach their potential because Inter Miami failed them, either in the developmental process or in their transition to the first team. So that's what I've got to say. Saur, thank you so much for being a part of this. Guys, we'll be back on Saturday, 1 hour before kickoff. That game is earlier in the day. For those that don't know, it is decision day, 5 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Eastern. Let me double check for that.
6 p.m. Eastern.
That game's at 6 p.m. Eastern, so we'll be here at 5 p.m. Eastern. It's decision day. Inter Miami can still jump to second. If not, the worst they're going to finish is third. So we'll tell you all about that 1 hour before kickoff. But until then, I hope you guys have a lovely night, and we will see you guys next time. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. Do us a favor and hit that like and subscribe button. Since our first viewer, sharing this with you all has been the very best part. So from the beginning until the end, thank you for being a part of this and have a wonderful day.